Edward Thorndike put forward a law of effect, which stated that any behavior that is followed by pleasant consequences is likely to be repeated, and any behavior followed by unpleasant consequences is likely to be stopped. By Kara Pascal and Michaela Prince. Instructor, Dr. Longman. Edward Thorndike's early life. Edward Lee Thorndike, born August 31st, 1874, died 1949. Early childhood. Edward learned to read at home but attended school regularly from the time he turned 5 years old. Beginning at the age of 12, he attended the high schools of Lowell, Boston, and Providence. While he was a very successful student, he initially disliked his first psychology course. Edward was a student who stood out. He won many prizes and scholarships. Thorndike stood out even in his secondary education. He won prizes in literature, Latin, Greek, psychology, moral philosophy, English composition, junior exhibition, and junior debate. Edward Thorndike's early life. Hometown, Williamsburg, Massachusetts. Parental information. His parents and grandparents were all natives of the state of Maine. His father, Edward Roberts Thorndike, a vigorous, fine-looking man of active mind and generous, impulsive disposition, first practiced law in Maine and then became a Methodist clergyman and a noted preacher in Massachusetts, where most of his pastorates were located. He married Abigail Brewster Ladd, described as an extraordinary, intelligent, and capable person, of marked artistic ability, deeply religious, and of shy, gentle manner, but with a will of steel. Her widowed mother, a woman of unusual ability and courage, was a helpful and much appreciated member of the Thorndike household. Edward had 4 gifted siblings, all whom lived to make their mark in the scholarly world. Ashley and Mildred in English literature, Lynn in medieval history, and Edward in psychology and the science of education. Ashley was the oldest, and Edward was next in order. Edward's early professional and personal life. Edward Thorndike, the founder of modern educational psychology. Education. Edward made a superior undergraduate record at Wesleyan University, 1891 to 95. His interest, so far conforming to his family background, was in literature and general erudition, and not in science. Going next to Harvard for graduate study, he made literature his major subject. Meanwhile, as a college junior, he started to study certain chapters of The Principle of Psychology by William James, and found that the book the most stimulating he had ever read. At Harvard, he attended James' lecture course, with the result that during the first year he made a decisive shift from literature to psychology. At Columbia University, where he studied under the guidance of a psychologist, James McKean Cattell. He was married to Elizabeth Moulton in the 1900s. Children. He had 4 children: Elizabeth, Francis, Edward, Alan, and Robert. Edward Thorndike's career as an educational psychologist. University of Florida. After earning his Ph.D. from Columbia in 1898, Thorndike briefly took a position as an assistant professor of pedagogy at Case Western Reserve University. He took a job as a psychology professor at the Teachers College at Columbia University, where he would continue to teach for the rest of his career. Theory development. Thorndike is perhaps best known for the theory he called the law of effect, which emerged from his research on how cats learn to escape from puzzle boxes. According to Thorndike's law of effect, responses that are immediately followed by a satisfactory outcome become more strongly associated with the situation and are therefore more likely to occur again in the future. Conversely, responses followed by negative outcomes become more weakly associated and less likely to reoccur in the future. Connectionism. Edward Thorndike's behavioral theory. Claim to fame. Thorndike is often referred to as the father of modern-day educational psychology. Thorndike was elected president of the American Psychological Association in 1912 and became one of the very first psychologists to be admitted to the National Academy of Sciences in 1917. Today, Thorndike is perhaps best remembered for his famous animal experiments and for the law of effect. Selected publications: Introduction to the Theory of Mental and Social Measurements in 1904, The Elements of Psychology in 1905, Animal Intelligence in 1911, Educational Psychology in 1913, The Measurements of Intelligence in 1926, and The Fundamentals of Learning in 1932. Edward Thorndike was best known for the law of effect, often called the father of modern educational psychology, animal research, and trial and error theory of learning.
Some of Edward Thorndike's greatest influences were Charles Darwin, Hermann Ebbinghaus, Carl Pearson, and Sir Francis Galton. Thorndike was known as being a part of the younger generation of psychologists. He paved the way for the way psychologists study and learn now. He was greatly impressed by the observations of Charles Darwin, especially when he was doing some of his early work on the study of animal learning and the way they respond to things. He was influenced by the memory studies of Hermann Ebbinghaus, the inventiveness and statistical methods of Sir Francis Galton and Carl Pearson, and he was greatly influenced by coworkers as well, such as Robert S. Woodworth and experimentalist Jacques Loeb. While working with Woodworth as a coworker while he was at Columbia, they studied the transfer of learning. Through this, Thorndike and Woodworth learned that just because somebody learns in one area doesn't mean they necessarily learn the same in another. So if a student's really good at math, they may not also be good in reading. He was also influenced by Jacques Loeb, who, like I said, is this experimentalist, and this is what ultimately led to him and the realization that he should remain working strictly in science. With Edward Thorndike's late life, he contributed greatly to psychology. His work was very extensive. He wrote well over 70 books and had many published articles. Because of his learning theory, we now have operant conditioning and behaviorism. He died in his home in Montrose, New York, at the age of almost 75. It was just a few days before his 75th birthday, on August 9th, 1949. When he died, he left behind his wife, Elizabeth, and all four of his children, which were of adult ages. They were grown, but all still living in the New York area. There's so much that we can thank Edward Thorndike for. the influence that his work had on current teaching practices. First of all, he helped establish testing for intelligence and statistics in education and psychology. So he was able to see through experiments in his study the way people test and their learning process and what they can remember from certain things. Thorndike's testing that was used for military services were adapted, and they were directly used to influence the use of standardized testings for school systems. So all the state testing, like the ACT, things like that, that was strictly from his work. Thorndike's theory on connectionism can be used today to see how punishment and reward affect the classrooms. When a student is punished, they will not have the willingness to go back and correct their behavior or to get back on task and do the work that they need to finish. So because of his studies, we learned that when they are rewarded for what they do, they will place great importance on academics and on school, and they'll work harder to remain on task, to have good behavior. And without him, we wouldn't have this.
Bibliography.